A mysterious voice commands you to wake up. Diagnostics and readouts flicker on screen as you activate and awaken within a cryopod. Surrounded by the low hum of machinery and systems churning in the background, you begin to explore your surroundings. As you probe and scrutinize the various chambers of the vessel, you find it uninhabited. You discover that the vessel's name is the Penrose 512, and that this ship has made a catastrophic collision with the planetary surface. You also come upon documents detailing who the protagonist is. You don't have a name, only a designation. A humanoid replica specialized in ship repair and maintenance. Within the cockpit of the craft, you discover that the Penrose 512 is well beyond any chance of repair. In here, you also find a heavily faded photograph. In the photograph, a smiling woman in a uniform. Exploring the heavily damaged ship further, you happen upon another cryopod. As the stasis tube hisses open and the fluid drains, you find no trace of the Gestalt officer it was meant to hold. Donning the spacesuit, you exit the ship onto a frozen wasteland, trudging almost blind with the Arctic wind blasting you from every direction. You notice bizarre stones jutting from the ground. And finally, you encounter a perfectly circular hole yawning from the earth itself. The surface of this bizarre hole seems to be made of a red, fleshy, organic material. Who or what created this? And within this hole in the earth, another hole just barely large enough for you to crawl through. As you emerge on the other side of this bizarre tunnel, the opening you entered seals itself behind you. Sitting innocuously on the table next to a radio is a piece of literature, The King in Yellow. Upon investigating the book, the monitor ahead of you springs to life. Alert appears in German, and an ominous transmission of numbers fills the screen. A series of images briefly flashes on the monitor as the flesh from your face slowly melts away, revealing a grinning metallic visage. We cut to a bathroom, where you find yourself staring blankly at a mirror. You learn that you have to find her, Ariane, and thus begins Signalis, a breath of fresh air in the survival horror genre. This is the Sierpinski facility, a sprawling mining company dug deep into the bowels of this planet. The first floor serves as a training area for current and future workers. As you delve further into the facility, it becomes apparent that something has gone horribly wrong here. The corpses of replicas lie strewn about the facility, their outer layer of organic flesh stripped from them or horrifically infected beyond all human recognition. You manage to come across a replica survivor of whatever happened here. You try to see if she knows the whereabouts of Ariane, the girl in the photo. The details she gives you are sparse, and the most important message she imparts to you is to get the hell out of here while you still can. Managing to get into one of the offices, you acquire your first form of self-defense, a 10mm pistol, alongside instructions on how to use it. Returning to a hallway you already explored, one of the infected replicas springs to life and mindlessly lunges at you with a blade, forcing you to put it down. Up ahead, you come across the second survivor. This time, a fully human woman. Clutching onto a knife, she is standing over the corpse of a slain replica. She, too, is looking for someone. Her sister, Erica. She has little to do but wish you luck as she departs to plunge further into the facility on her own personal rescue mission. The further you descend into the facility, the worse things get. Whatever has infected this facility is crawling and pulsing along the walls, floors, and ceilings. You encounter replicas stuck in a loop, mimicking the tasks they once performed while they were still alive. The horrid cancerous growth seems to be breathing, and it's everywhere, covering the walls, floors, and furniture of the facility. After acquiring 2 halves of a mysterious key, we open an innocuous butterfly box stowed away within an inconspicuous storage room. We undergo another perspective shift. This time, we're mysteriously whisked away to an isolated telecommunications array somewhere atop a frozen mountainside. Alone, we explore this place. This has to be a fragment or piece of Ariane's memory, because here we find a letter from Ariane's aunt, encouraging her to join an educational facility elsewhere on the planet. Crucial to our progress, we also find a radio implant that will allow us to tap into various signal stations. We use it to open a locked door here and are teleported back to the Sierpinski mining facility. You manage to get the elevator functioning again and descend to the 3rd floor, the medical wing of the facility. This is the largest area we have to explore yet, and the deeper you go, the larger, faster, and more dangerous the replicants become. In this wing of the facility, we discover the grisly handiwork of the facility's overseer, an administrative replicant named Adler. Within a room bathed in a crimson glow, the tortured and disfigured remains of replicants are stuffed into cages. Adjacent to it is an interrogation room still splattered with the grisly leftovers of Adler's corporal punishments. You also come upon another survivor, a storch unit. Terrified, she refuses to budge and states she'll wait for orders. Orders which in all likelihood will never come. After inserting a tape into a VCR, we enter another eerie fragment of Ariane's memory. You see a brief flash of her sitting alone and dejected on the train before she vanishes. Where she once sat, we find one of 6 keys, necessary to progress past the medical wing. We continue to sneak and fight our way through the medical wing to acquire the rest of the 6 keys. After assembling the 6 keys, we find ourselves before another drop. This time, we land into a chamber with a hulking, highly dangerous mining unit equipped with a powerful mining drill. Take advantage of the pillar in the middle of this room for this fight, in order to avoid its powerful but highly telegraphed attacks. We have to wait for the beast to malfunction and open its helmet in order to get some shots in. When the miner unit's helmet is finally off, it begins to leak a loathsome biomass onto the floor. Unload your bullets and buckshot when this opportunity presents itself. This large replica can also reactivate smaller enemy replicas which end up joining the fight. Make sure to use flares to permanently down the adds or they will harangue you throughout this battle. After dispatching the mining unit, we finally meet with the administrator of this facility, Adler. He's deceptively cordial at first, and feigns an offer for help. As soon as you show him the picture you have of Ariane, he shoves you into a deep elevator shaft. We have a sudden perspective shift to Issa, the Gestalt we met earlier. We seem to be experiencing her memories during her time as a student at an educational facility at Rotfront. Here, she was a classmate and friend of Ariane. We witness Ariane being viciously bullied by some other girls at the facility, and we're left to wonder why our vision has shifted to Issa of all people in the past. Elster wakes up to discover a pile of corpses has broken her fall in the elevator shaft. The discarded mass of replica corpses you don't remark on, but they look suspiciously similar to Elster herself. Could these be copies of her? You've now made it to the 5th floor service wing. This area is the most sprawling, interconnected section we've encountered yet. The enemies here are very numerous and densely packed. You slowly make your way through the cleaning room, repair bays, and offices of this floor. We cut to a scene of Adler cornering Erica. He maintains the facade of a helpful demeanor. Erica is trying to enter Commander Falk's chamber as Adler slowly approaches her. She backs away, terrified, and the brief scene ends. We continue to explore this area where we have our first encounter with the psychic replicants known as the Colibri units. These replicants have huge, horrible, bloated heads which shake uncontrollably. They're immobile and can't attack you physically, but emit a signal which scrambles all your senses. These units form a psychic hive mind whose communication resembles a song. The closer you get to them, the more garbled your vision becomes. You acquire a fuse and insert it into a power box on the 5th floor. By balancing the voltage levels in this fuse box, you can reactivate the lifts, giving you a way to get down to the 8th floor, which was previously not accessible. Down here, we find an unconscious Falk unit, the commander of the Serbinsky facility. She seems to be in a deep sleep, clutching an unusual owl-shaped container. We read in her journal that somehow she came into contact with an entity known as the Red Eye. She describes the phenomena of having her memories melded or altered by another person, and that as a result, she has lost her sense of self. She also mentions seeing visions of and being obsessed with a white-haired girl. She describes herself as being cursed by this woman. We're also treated to some background information on the Falk unit herself, what she was built for, and her status as leader among the protector units of this facility. Also on the floor of this facility is a briefing room. Here we get some lore regarding the planets of the solar system and how it relates to the greater conflict between the Empire and the nation of Yusan. The solar system map also provides us with a visual key to a puzzle later on in this floor. We discover the flashlight module here as well. Behind this painting of an island, we get an access key to the workshop. This painting is a constantly repeating image throughout the storyline. It is the image that will project into your mind if you get too close to the psychic Colibri units. Within the workshop, we find an audio tape deck attached to a radio which can be used to play a cassette on a projected frequency. The darkened dorms in the corner of this floor are filled to the brim with enemies. Being forced to use the flashlight prevents you from using other essential tools like the stun baton or flares here. If you're low on ammo, this part can be an absolute nightmare. Although luckily, there is nothing too essential in this area. After acquiring the cassette tape with an owl head painted on it, we can now play this radio frequency through our own radio module. Playing this song near Commander Falk's owl container will cause it to open. Inside, you will find the next key needed for further progression. Eventually, we find ourselves in a library. Here we encounter a conscious, living, uninfected Calibri unit. She laments being cut off from the other Calibri units. She mentions how lonely she is, being disconnected from their psychic hive mind, even wishing she'd become infected. We acquire an astrolabe here from a vending machine. We can use this astrolabe in Adler's room. Using the star map found within the briefing room as a key, we open the locked safe in Adler's room. In Adler's chamber, we get some insight into his character through his journal. We learn that he's been trapped in a sort of time loop and is fully aware of it. He doesn't reveal it to anyone as it would risk him being deactivated. After acquiring Adler's key, we take the long elevator ride down into the mines below the primary facility. We witness a cutscene where Issa is being hunted down by Adler, who claims he's done this many times before. Issa manages to sneak behind him and stabs Adler in the eye, setting him hurriedly down a deep hole into the mine. Down here, we find a damaged mining unit leaned up against a wall. She seems strangely nonchalant about her fate and tells you to leave her to die. She mentions that she's just a replica after all, and easily replaceable. Further into the mines, we find a dying star unit. Another replica is standing over her, weeping inconsolably about her companion's death. The star unit is trying to reassure her companion about the situation. The star unit tells her she remembers her Gestalt name and that this will be their secret, as a kind of reconciliation for her death. Before we descend down to the next level, we find a miner unit accompanied by 2 protector units. We don't have to defeat these enemies, just avoid them long enough for the hatch to open and let us into the lower sections of the mine. Here we find the massive hole Adler was hurled into earlier. As we drop down below, our perspective shifts into the first person yet again. We've been transported to a beach on the island we've been seeing throughout the game. The beach itself is littered with cryptic poetry and passages written by an unknown author. Who wrote these letters? Why are they here? What is their text meant to represent? Could they be another manifestation of Ariane's thoughts or something else? A multitude of human skulls lie half buried on these desolate shores. We suddenly find ourselves somewhere else being nowhere. The architecture of this new location makes no sense. There is no map, and the individual rooms connect in seemingly nonsensical ways, disorienting the player. Gold plates with geometrically shaped patterns adorn locked cages blocking our progression. The entire floor consists of rusted metal grating and seems to be built in a vague mockery of the Sierpinski facility. A gaping hole in the floor, beating like a cancerous heart, beckons us to drop down. We land on a floor now covered entirely in a membrane of pulsating red flesh. As we drop down below, we encounter Issa being accosted by a twisted amalgamation of replica limbs fused together within a caged box. Its many appendages flail wildly in an attempt to capture and kill you. Kiting it around this room isn't too difficult. You only need to down it once, and to wait for Issa to reload and finally dispatch the twisted creature. After Issa delivers the coup de grace, she falls unconscious from the massive recoil of the rifle. We pick Issa up and lay her to rest on a nearby table as we venture further into this nightmare. Large chambers spiderwebbed with barbed wire hold valuable items for regression. Many of these rooms seem to be twisted inversions of the rooms and architecture that existed within the original Sierpinski facility. In one room, we find a device that we can play radio signals into, giving us passcodes to the various locked cages. You eventually find some smelling salts that let you awaken Issa. She thanks you, leaves, and lets you have her high-powered rifle. Here and nowhere, there are even higher concentrations of deadly enemies. We assemble the 6 plates at a doorway that finally lets us leave nowhere. We find ourselves in a circular pit of flesh, similar to the one we first descended into. Climbing back up, we ascend to the surface of the planet. We encounter Adler at the mysterious stone doorway we walked through at the beginning of the game. Issa's knife is still embedded in his eye. Adler laments about Commander Falk. Instead of snow, the landscape is composed of blood-red sand. We continue unperturbed until we find the buried Penrose 512. We witness different versions of Ariane and Elster lined up, different versions of the same persona in different timelines, each possibly representing different loops of whatever cycle we're caught in. We attempt to unsuccessfully pry open the ship, only to have the failed attempt to tear off our arm. Our unit powers down, and it seems like Elster has perished. The credits roll, and we're seemingly at the end. But this isn't the end. When we return to the main menu screen, things are different. Our character's eye is dead and is no longer lit from behind. We do have the option to begin again, and everything seems the same at first. But it isn't. When we explore the vessel, it is apparent that something has changed. The Penrose 512 is now in functioning order. When we look out the window, we see stars, not a barren snowy landscape. We have a checklist of mundane maintenance tasks to complete, the last of which is reporting to our Gestalt officer, Ariane. Here, we find a classified document detailing problems and quirks of the Elster unit. We also find Ariane's diary. After completing the checklist, we finally meet up with Ariane, who is quite happy to see us. The two share a dance and lay beside one another blissfully. The scene ends, and a series of numbers plays again. We are now back with our old body. Ariane appears for a brief moment, and we crawl into the ruined spacecraft. The ship is in far worse shape than before. We find Ariane's life pod. It's completely covered in the pulsing organic substance. Next to the consumed life pod is another dead Elster unit. Committed to not giving up, we tear off the unit's arm and reattach it to ours. Huge sections of the ship have been consumed and cordoned off by the fleshy mass. In the hull of the ship, we find another fleshy hole beckoning us to drop down. After we drop down, we're once again teleported back to the beach we were on earlier. After reading more cryptic notes, we find a boat on the shore of the island. Then, we're back in the Sierpinski facility, except it's changed. The cancerous biomass has all but completely consumed the halls of the facility. It's blocked off most of the hallways, and its tendrils have seeped its way onto every surface. Dodging our way through halls filled with hostile replicas, we finally come to another pit of flesh. After jumping down this pit of flesh, we witness Adler ruminating over the unconscious body of Commander Falk. He slowly becomes disfigured and mutated like the other replicants. As the camera zooms in on his hideous visage, he confesses his hatred for everything, and the scene ends. After this cutscene is over, Elster finds herself transported to the Rotfront Educational Facility, the same educational facility Ariane spent some of her formative years. We discover a blue disc amidst a pile of rubbish. Using this disc on the computer terminal, we can triangulate a particular radio tower through which we can play a radio signal that will help us progress. We triangulate the location of the right signal using the east and west radio towers. We just need to send the magpie transmission through this radio tower. Subsequently, playing this frequency through your radio will open a box giving you access to the next tarot card. We can enter the bottom floor of the Rotfront facility by leaping down into a disabled meat grinder. We see a brief flash of Ariane bleeding and in a great deal of pain. Within this chamber, we find another one of the tarot cards amidst torn out bloody teeth and pulsing flesh. Reading a document here, we also learn of the millions who have starved as a result of the blockade from the Empire. The hallways of the basement floor are filled to the brim with dangerous foes in great numbers. On the second floor, we find a note of an officer expressing their doubts and misgivings regarding bioresonance, the technology that forms the foundation of replicas. In the same room, we also acquire one of the cards from a safe. The code can be discerned from patterns on the butterfly wings. We find the moon card in a safe also filled with cocooned butterflies preparing to hatch. The red disc is found in a bloody dentist room at the end of the same hallway. A teacher's note next to the magpie box gives us insight into Ariane's character, her interests, and why she was considered an outcast by her peers. The red disc we found earlier contains medical records of various Rotfront personnel. We need to use the identification number in one of these records to help us get a code to enter the Ito family bookstore. We discover a tome of banned literature in the back of the bookstore. This book gives us some more insight into bioresonance, and we're offered a more religious, spiritual explanation for the phenomena. We also find Issa. This is our last encounter with her. Issa confesses that she's failed in her mission to find her sister. She reaches out to you, but her flesh is soon consumed by the contagion. As her skin blackens, she begins to melt into the floor, ultimately leaving only a black stain on the floor. A somber end to the only Gestalt human we've met in our journeys. In the same room, we also find the tarot card of death next to a portrait of Issa and her sister. We acquire our final tarot card in this locker on the basement floor. We also discover the identity of the Imperial spy. We finally assemble all the tarot cards in room 512, also known as the meat room. We must arrange these cards in the correct locations based on the dream book next to the altar. This dream book's passages gives us clue as to which card belongs to which planet. By arranging the cards in a certain pattern, we acquire the key to open up the moon mural found in the first chamber of the facility. After we assemble all the cards and discover the correct way to dial in the various moon phases in the mural, we move on to the final leg of the game. In the center of the mural is a hole that lets us get a glimpse of the chamber on the other side. After we have dialed in the correct moon phase for each planet, the hole morphs open and we fly through to the other side. We find ourselves in the radio room from the beginning of the game. On the shelves are radio operating manuals and novels Ariane used to love. After picking up The King in Yellow, we come close to the point of no return. We read letters from Ariane's mother regarding her future service. Also found in this room is a note from the government discussing Ariane's upcoming compulsory military service. At the door to the north of this chamber, we're told that this is the end, and we're given the option to leave forever. Elster walks down a long metallic corridor. Here we find some of Adler's notes, chronicling the infection. He describes all the events that have transpired as a corruption of reality itself, and not some naturally occurring phenomena. We also found a drawing with notes from Falk. This confirms her memories and mind have somehow melded with that of Elster. Falk muses on the loss of her own individuality and the melding of her minds with Elster. The final note contains a drawing of Ariane and Elster embracing. We once again find Falk lying on her bed. She acknowledges that she shares memories with us and speaks longingly about Ariane. She rises, flanked by 6 spears. She uses these spears as her initial attack. She'll send the spears floating around her body into the air and they'll come crashing down below. You can grab these spears into your inventory, then when she's taken sufficient damage, We can impale her head with the spear contained in our inventory. Each time she takes a spear to the face, the environment will warp and shift. This can give us crucial healing items and ammo if we're willing to run around for them a little. The reality shift will also spawn hostile replicas who will chase us across the arena. During each phase of the fight, she'll have different new abilities. These include the ability to send out psychic shockwaves. They grow in width as they move further away from her, but will also damage the adds in the area. Our vision will also become more distorted during this fight, sometimes making navigation and reading her attacks much more difficult. Bulk will also spawn rotating shields, forcing you to precisely time your attacks against her. For this final fight, I decided to use the rifle and the revolver. Near the end of the fight, she'll start sending out these shockwaves in a circular pattern all around her. Eventually, Falk will go down. Falk clutches at your chest and collapses. Once again, we come to the stone gate, where Adler is waiting for us. He warns you against proceeding and threatens that reality itself may fall apart if we proceed onwards. He lunges us with a knife, and we pelt him with a round in the stomach. He desperately crawls after us as we walk through the gate. We traverse the bloody red landscape back to Penrose 512. We re-enter the ship for a final time. We get some insights into Ariane's thinking and read about her worsening condition. She was likely getting cancer and other afflictions as a result of the radiation leak of the failing onboard equipment. The failing life support systems and radiation shielding ultimately led to Ariane's slow and painful demise. We can read her thoughts and feelings during this painful process, and we also read about her own desire for death. Finally, we find the body of the Elster unit. Perhaps the first Elster unit, or the real Elster unit. We finally come to Ariane's life pod, where she is waiting for us. Lying in a pool of crimson liquid, she begs for us to fulfill our promise. We slowly and reluctantly wrap our hands around Ariane's throat. This last act is a fulfillment of our promise, and we lay down beside Ariane's life pod. The light behind our eyes fades, and we drift into nothingness with Ariane.